Hello everyone and welcome to the 24th edition of the Salt Lunchbox. We welcome you on Zoom but also on Facebook Live where we've been getting good numbers in our audience. My name's Dave, I'm the founder of Salt Sport and Life Training. Most of you know we're a not-for-profit health organisation looking to find opportunities to build on the positives that are emerging during this difficult and challenging time in our history. And the aim of the Lunchbox series from the outset was to inspire and connect, and to make sure that people go away with at least 3 summary points from each session and a practical call to action. As always, we're going to have the chat and the Q&A icons at the bottom of your screen, where we suggest that you can make comments or ask questions. And today, instead of having James as our moderator, we've got Lane, who we all know from being on the panel, as our moderator. And actually, James, you're going to get to see his face today. He's going to join us on our panel. Before we get started, we want to thank our sponsors, Eastland, Bendigo Bank and FC Business Solutions. As we always do, our wonderful sponsors have made these sessions possible. Well, as I said, we're being joined by James, who's sitting in an Italian market, and with Belinda Smith. James, as you know, has been our moderator. We thought you'd like to see his face, and now that you've seen it, perhaps you wish he'd stayed just being the moderator. Oh, now he's disappeared again. I've offended him. No, he's got a good-looking face. He is a director at Yellow Box Careers, a lead facilitator at Roses in the Ocean. So he works with people who've had a lived experience of suicide. He's a SALT presenter. He's our Lunchbox moderator and a father of 15-year-old twins. James was born with cystic fibrosis. And when he was 15, he was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, which required 4 insulin injections a day. And due to being on antibiotics for more than 40 years, he also has something called osteopenia, which requires plenty of calcium in his diet as well. So James has mentored lots of young kids in regard to diabetes and health plans over the years. Welcome, James. And just briefly, what is osteopenia?
It's the stepping stone, and hopefully I don't get there, to osteoporosis. Which is a lack of vitamin D and a lack of calcium in the bones. So compensated with vitamin D and compensated with lots of milk and calcium, hopefully I'll be okay.
Terrific.
Thanks, Dave.
Belinda, no, it's good to have you. And thanks for being our moderator for all the sessions up till now. Belinda, who I've learnt prefers to be called Belle, describes herself as a wife, a mum, a health coach, and a children's empowerment expert. Belle is the creator of the Mad Food Science program and the 5-minute healthy lunchbox system, as well as being author of the book, The Lunchbox Effect. Dubbed the Lunchbox Vigilante by Channel 7 Sunrise, Belle appears regularly in national and regional TV, radio and press. And she was recently mentioned in federal parliament for the work she's been doing across Australia. Her vision is for kids to choose real food every day as their normal food. Welcome, Belle. Are you really a lunchbox vigilante?
No, not at all. That's just TV hype up. I have to say I'm passionate about lunchboxes because that's kind of where it started out for me. Nearly 9 years ago, my husband was diagnosed with postnatal depression, and we found a massive link between what we were eating and how he was able to regulate his moods. And so I started to change what we were eating, including my daughter's lunchboxes, and she started to get teased. And so as a result, she stopped eating her lunch. And then, so I created the Mad Food Science program just for her class. Wow. To explain why she has that kind of food. And the results were phenomenal. And that's why we actually took it around the country for 2.5 years, went to 90 schools, and reached over 20,000 children, parents and teachers. And it was mind-blowing what I discovered was going on about lunchboxes and what kids were taking to school to fuel their bodies and the impact it was having in classes and on teacher stress. Anyway, that's why I basically wrote The Lunchbox Effect, because when I got back, I had all this anecdotal information that I'd collected, but I needed to find the studies to support what that anecdotes have been telling us. So the Lunchbox Effect was officially published in April, but I haven't been able to launch it because of COVID. Like, headspace of teachers and parents just wasn't there at that time.
Wow. Well, I was going to ask you how you got passionate about this, but you've explained that to us. And in chatting to you over the last few days, like to begin with, I thought, oh, she's just going to tell us eat healthy food. But actually, it's far, far more than that. It's simple in many ways, but profound in lots of ways, what you've discovered, and could be either, you know, the answer to many issues that we might not have realised with our own kids. So tell us what you've learnt and, you know, give us some really practical advice. Particularly, I know you've got some thoughts around school canteens and sporting club canteens. So over to you, Belle.
Oh, thank you. Thank you firstly for having me on. And I think this conversation is a great kind of bookend to the one that you've already had with Edwina around sleep, because she spoke about how our bodies compensate for lack of sleep, but how it plays out in the classroom. And then food does exactly the same thing. It plays out on the sports field, it plays out in the classroom. And then, of course, yesterday, Craig's conversation around exercise, and really exercise is, he clearly said yesterday, you can't out-train a bad diet. So let me talk about that, because I have a real bugbear with the word diet because it has such a negative connotation. I like to talk to people about this as being food is the way we eat. And there's foods that help our body, and then there's foods that, you know, don't really help our body. Really, really simple stuff. But I guess I wanted to start this session really by setting the scene, because as we travelled around, I've had lots of people say, oh, everything in moderation. Well, what I'm going to share with you today is that moderation, in terms of the actual definition of moderation, no longer really exists in the way a lot of people eat. I ate that when I'm growing up and I'm all right is another big one. But then, of course, now if you look at our health statistics, there's a lot of people who are in that generation that said, I grew up with that and I'm all right, who are now starting to get quite a few autoimmune conditions, inflammation, that kind of thing. So lots of things. So I'm going to share, if it's all right with you, Dave, my screen and just go over a couple of slides. And I want to start by talking about today's food culture, because turning back the clock 20 or 30 years ago, you might have had cereal, but in your lunchbox you would have had a sandwich and maybe a piece of fruit and maybe a homemade cake or something that, you know, mum had packed. And then at dinner we would usually have, you know, meat and vegetables. Today, if you look at what's getting eaten, we've got children that I think it's about 1 in 5 children are going to school without having had breakfast. And then the remainder are having breakfast, of which 70% are having cereal. And Choice Magazine recently reviewed the cereals on offer, and 110 cereals that they had, you know, rated showed up that they could almost be deemed to be confectionery because of the amount of sugar that's in them. So our kids are going to school, and even on the weekend going to sport, fueled up on breakfast cereals that are largely sugar-based. And then when you add to that what they've got in their lunchbox, what we now know from our own studies and other studies that have been done, most Australian children are having 2 to 4 packet foods in their lunchbox. And I want to share just some of the statistics. In my book, The Lunchbox Effect, I reviewed 500 different lunchbox products, and mind-blowing to think that there's that many, and that's not even covering all of them. What we discovered is that that each lunchbox, based on the packets alone, had about 29 different ingredients in it, and each one had the equivalent of 3.6 teaspoons of sugar in it, and 9 additives, 4 of which can be contributed to hyperactivity, learning difficulty, behaviour, and also triggering things like asthma, which is one of the leading causes of absences from school. So when you combine breakfast with lunch, what's fueling our kids for their day isn't really that great anymore. And then, of course, it really depends on how busy mum and dad are about what they get for their afternoon tea and dinner. So, you know, food culture is very different today. So the whole, that's just a treat or everything in moderation doesn't really wash when most of the food that our children are eating is actually deemed to be discretionary food under the Australian dietary guidelines. You know, they're eating sometimes foods every single day. So moderation is really questionable. So I wanted to share that. But I wanted to also say on the flip side, the food that's everyday food, look at these statistics. 96% of our children aren't eating the recommended amounts of fruits and vegetables, and only 6% are. You know, so on the one hand, the food that we're supposed to be eating just isn't getting eaten. And on the other side, the food that shouldn't be eaten is actually getting eaten every day. So, you know, we need to do something about redressing the balance. So our food culture is very different. And that's actually leading into, I guess, what, you know, James might comment on as well, is the amounts of sugar. So children today are eating excessive amounts of sugar. So the World Health Organization says that you and I as adults should only have about 6 teaspoons of added or free sugar a day, which is 24 grams. But have a look at what our children are eating. Now, primary age children, which is where my focus predominantly is, should only really be having 3 to 5 teaspoons of added sugar a day, depending upon their productivity level, their activity level and their age. But look what they're having. You know, we've got up there 6 teaspoons for an adult, but 4 to 8-year-old boys are having 13 teaspoons. And if you look at it for 9 to 13-year-old, it's 17 teaspoons. And the same kind of picture shows up for girls. Now, this kind of eating is leading to a lot of our children now being diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, which was once called adult onset diabetes. You know, we used to get it after years of neglect of our body, but children as young as 10 are actually getting it. And it is, as opposed to type 1 diabetes, type 2 diabetes is a lifestyle related condition and can be improved obviously by exercise, but also by the food that we're eating. And I like to think there's kind of 4 pillars of health. We've had, you know, you've been talking about sleep with Edwina, exercise with Craig. I know you've done lots of stuff around thoughts, so that's the 3rd pillar. And I like to think of nutrition as I just call it for kids, what you're eating. You know, really simple. What you're eating is the 4th pillar of your health. And unfortunately today, a lot of people say, don't tell me what to feed my kids. It's not your job. And they're exactly right. It's not my job. My job is actually just to raise awareness about what's going on. And so that's what I really wanted to share today, is that our food culture has totally shifted. So James, did you want to add anything to that around the sugar?
Yeah, so what's fascinating, imagine if you're between 14 and 18-year-old male or female, and you're sitting there and putting 22 teaspoons of sugar in a day, 1 an hour, you know, and you know, maybe 2 an hour if you're 12 hours a day. Fascinating, and the impact it would have on your body. And I guess not knowing about this, and you know, when if I have a low sugar because of my diabetes, traditionally I'd grab, you know, a small handful of sweets, and that would bring me up to a normal level. But if I'm really bad, the doctors have said the sugariest drink you can have is Lucozade, which when I was growing up, I thought that was okay. But there's so much sugar in that, I'm surprised actually the liquid moves around. It's fascinating stuff.
You've talked about that, Belle, haven't you, about Gatorade and some of the drinks which particularly sporting clubs often offer players in terms of recovery. Maybe tell us a bit about that. Yeah,
look, I mean, one of my favourite catch cries and what I train children in is to ask the question of what's in my food. You know, it's not about you can't have processed food or junk food. It's really about, if you're going to have it, let's just consciously choose it, all right? When I say consciously choose it, it's like, ask what is actually in it and turn it around and look at the ingredients. And I've got a slide on this. If we don't get to it, no big drama. But it's like, look at the ingredients and have an actual, you know, like, can you see ingredients in there that you can't wrap your tongue around? Where is sugar in the ingredients? How many ingredients are there? And let's just talk about Gatorade, for instance. There's the marketing of Gatorade as a sports drink is phenomenal. And the fact that our leading sports people, are seen drinking it, our kids naturally think that they need it for sport. And every school that I've been to, and we're up to 140 odd schools now, no matter what age the children are, I can pull a bottle of blue Gatorade out of my bag and they will go, yum. No one does that for a carrot or an apple. So what's fascinating about Gatorade is firstly that it's marketed as to replace your electrolytes. Now, sports nutrition, and I'm not a sports nutritionist, so I've got to make that clear, but when you research this stuff, you only really need to replace your electrolytes if you've been doing vigorous exercise for an hour or more. So your AFL players, cricket players, all of those guys, they train heavily, and yes, they get up to that. But the average child on a weekend or, playing their footy game, they get subbed on and off. They don't have the full intensity that our professional players have. In each one of those bottles of Gatorade is 9 teaspoons of sugar. Mm. And what's even more...
Sorry, but what about the sugar-free Powerade or Gatorades?
Oh, beautiful question. I'm just leading into along the lines. It's not just the sugar that becomes the problem, it's what else is in there. So if you start to look at the colours that get added to these drinks, they are largely synthetically made in a chemistry lab. Okay, so then they get mass produced in a factory. And so take, for instance, blue Gatorade. It's got a colour called 133, which sounds quite beautiful. It's called brilliant blue, but it's actually derived. It starts in a chemistry lab derived from petroleum. And when you look at the research of what actually is in that particular colour, like what it can trigger, potential effects are, I should know this off the top of my head, carcinogenic, possible carcinogens, hyperactivity, learning difficulties, and aside from that, there's Dave and I had been speaking previously about a lot of the foods that are given to kids after sport are foods that it's not just sugar that's the problem, which is what everyone talks about. It's actually the colours that are getting added and the flavours, and some of them can trigger asthma. And the reality is there's a lot of kids now with asthma, and we potentially link that to just it's a health issue. We really need to be careful and have a puffer on hand. But that packet of barbecue shapes that they've had that has, a flavour 635 disodium 5-ribonucleotides that's made in the chemistry lab, that particular one can potentially affect asthma. So it really is a minefield, which is why I say, let's ask what's in my food. So I'm going to quickly, because I'm watching the time and I really want to talk about the role that clubs play in children's health. This is what makes me passionate. We have one of the highest allergy rates in the world. And when you look at a lot of our foods, the additives in there can trigger those allergies. Now, I'm not saying every child is affected by this, but I'm just saying let's be conscious. Let's actually look at what's in my food, because if your child does have eczema or asthma, or if they're having learning difficulties or behavioural problems, simply turning the packet around and going from a flavoured packet of chips, for instance, to a plain packet could actually see a change in that. We've got, childhood conditions on the increase. I work with an integrative GP and she's treating children as young as 12 with high blood pressure and stroke. Things that were previously virtually unheard of. We've got, 1 in 4 of our kids are now overweight or obese. And then I spoke about the condition in Australia, it's commonly called toffee, thin on the outside, fat on the inside. So a lot of the foods, our bodies, as Edwina spoke about, compensate for a lot. So outwardly, we might be healthy, but what's going on the inside? And then, of course, the one that really drives me is that says that our children potentially have a shorter life expectancy than us. So that's what really drives me.
Talk to us about sports canteens. Again, when we go to the footy and watch local footy, we love a pie, a dim sim, chips, their staple diet, easy to cook, good profits, I'm sure. But there was a time when I was watching my son play in the Ammos, and some of the Ammo clubs were selling salad rolls and healthy things. And I thought, oh, I will go to the canteen there because I like to get a salad roll. And they were the first things to sell out. And even though they were like $6 or $7 instead of $4, thanks, James, they were the first things to sell out. So I think it's a bit of a misnomer, isn't it, that we think we can only make profits on those unhealthy foods.
Thanks for raising that, Dave. It's so true, because I actually did a highlight, I guess, shine the spotlight on school canteens, because as we travelled around, there's a general myth that canteens can't make money from selling this food. But there's loads of canteens that are actually, more people are buying from them because they're selling healthy options. And they're actually branching out and even providing healthy takeaway meals to families. So specifically, and they are making money, by the way, making more money than they were selling the other stuff. And it's not about that they don't sell the other stuff. It's just about front and center. They put, water and the healthy options up front rather than the pies and the sausage rolls. The second thing I really want to highlight about sport is we tell kids you need to exercise and it's really important for health. And so on the field, we're doing that. But what's the message that we're giving them when they get off the field? Here, have a lolly, buy a packet of chips, have a can of drink, which has 10 to 13 teaspoons of sugar in it. We really are giving them very mixed messages. So if we're going to talk to them about health on the field, we should be doing healthy things off the field as well.
You're preaching our language. That's salt. That's how we started, although salt's unhealthy. But the whole idea was we're courageous, sacrificial, committed, etc., on the field, and yet off the field, we're not consistent with our message around health. And imagine if sporting clubs were largely focused on physical and mental health in an environment that we love to be in. And there's no reason why we can't. And during this time of pivoting, rethinking, reimagining what we're going to look like in the future, this is something clubs could really focus on. I'm conscious of the time, and Lane's asked the question, how do we identify the contents in foods that could be carcinogenic or asthma-inducing? Can you answer that in 1 minute or less?
Sure can. Fantastic question, Lane. There's a great app made by an Australian guy. It's called The Chemical Maze. And it's probably the best $12 or $13 investment that you can get. It'll tell you where it's derived and the potential impacts that it's having. There's a lot of things that affect gastrointestinal ailments on kids and adults, and IBS is a big thing affecting adults. So yeah, that's called The Chemical Maze. I did actually see there was another question, is it because we're less connected, paddock to plate? Definitely. I mean, there is a definite disconnect between where food comes from. And we saw that as we travelled around Australia. A lot of children didn't get the difference between a fresh pear and canned pears, like seriously. So there is a definite disconnect.
Thank you. James, final word, and then I'm going to start winding things up because we've got a couple of announcements to make.
I don't eat these hamburgers behind me. These are Big Macs, are they, Dave? You get 2 for $6. I caught one of the sessions the other day.
And I actually got an announcement on my phone just a few minutes ago from McDonald's, because they know me, so they send me little updates, and this one said hand sanitizer is available at McDonald's. So there you go. There's some good things about McDonald's, but no, thanks for exposing the world to that. James, thank you for all that you've done in the lead up, but it was good for people to actually see you. And Belle, I reckon I could listen to you for hours, and it is fascinating. It's not such a big effort for us just to know what we're eating. And you were talking earlier about, I asked you about Subway, and you said, there's good sauces and there's bad sauces. And I just randomly choose a sauce if I go to Subway, but if I knew the good ones from the bad ones, I'd probably make an informed choice. So I think sometimes it's about making informed choices, isn't it, around our health and around our kids' health, which is all the more important. So let me share my screen with you and 3 takeaways from today.
Takeaways, Dave?
Yeah, thank you.
Takeaways?
No, not takeaways. 3 points that we might just take home with us. Thanks for that, James. 1, promote water. 2, offer healthy snacks. And look, I'm absolutely certain that the way we condition our kids growing up is what they choose in the future. I was saying our kids don't drink soft drink because they never had it as kids, and now they just don't choose to have it. And clubs who sell healthy food, I think this is terrific for our clubs, actually can increase their profits. We're an enlightened society. Call to action: start conversations with your club or your school canteen, if necessary, about healthy choices and putting that food front and center so that people coming see it there. They can still get their dim sims, but they might just choose the salad roll. Want to thank our sponsors, Bendigo Bank, Eastland, and FC Business Solutions. If you've missed a session, you can see it on our Facebook site. Now we've got 24 there now on every given topic that we really did hope to cover during this COVID period, which brings me to let you know that as I talk about Club Reconnect and what we're doing in clubs, I want to let you know that this will be the last Lunchbox edition in its current format. We wanted to see out the period where we were at home and people were working from home and could take lunch off. And we did 24 sessions in 8 weeks. And we are grateful to all of you who have listened regularly, who've promoted what we've done, who've sponsored what we've done, and who've taken part in the chat and so on. I really want to thank some people, Edwina and Ricky, who you've heard many, many times, who dropped everything to come on and inform us and would spend hours and hours and hours preparing for the content to make sure that it was not just the latest research, but it was something that people might not have heard before. To Mighty Lane, again, our chairman, and who's been part of our panel. And again, I can throw any question to, and he will, he'll actually know the answer, or he'll sound like he does. To James, it was great to have you on today. James, you've got the Last Supper there behind you. Thanks for that. James, you've been fantastic as our moderator, and you've given us terrific feedback after every session as to how we can improve it. To Larice, we've had on a number of times, and she's been part of the planning team, as has Ian. And Peter, our technical man, is the CEO of SALT, and he's in the background making things work. To Alex, Matt, Karina, Glow, and everyone who we love at FC Business Solutions, every slide and all our background, all our promoting, all our social media has been through them, and the publicity has been terrific for us. We've expanded into a much wider audience. To Jody Murphy and the team at Eastland, who when I said we were going to do something, said, well, we want to contribute. They didn't have to because we're going to do it anyway. But Eastland have been out trying to find every way they can to help and reach their community. To Bendigo Bank, our wonderful foundation sponsors, we want to thank you to everyone. We will be moving to an evening slot. It won't start straight away. It might be a few weeks away. We'll keep you informed. It's going to be more aimed at clubland and how we can embed values into our clubs, how we can practice the very best practices, and we're going to highlight clubs that are doing things really well. We need to now pivot into this Club Reconnect. We want to take it across the country. We've done half a dozen sessions of it, and it is transformational. It's about how do we come back and meet people where they're at on whatever scale you know, they're feeling in regards to their own well-being and mental health. And so as we come to the end, I want to thank you. That's the number for Lifeline, as we've always made apparent. Thanks to everybody for being a part. Thank you very much, Belle, for what you had to share today. If people want to go to your website, it's called The Root Cause. Is that right? Publicise, let us know how we can get to your website.
Just pop that in the chat window. Thanks, Dave.
No worries. Thank you, James. Again, today we didn't get to hear as much as we might normally. And thanks again to everybody. You know, we've come through this period, and I believe that we are richer, that we are better, that we are stronger in the things that matter. That is reinforced by every time we go into a club now and we hear about what they've been doing and who they've become, better versions of themselves, where those who are in need are being vulnerable and talking about it, and those that have capacity are reaching out and saying, I'm available to you and I'm here to help. So thanks, everybody. It's 1:30. We did 24 sessions. We loved every one of them. You can see them on replay if you go to our Facebook site. And so I'll say it one more time and for the last time, thanks. Remember, we do come out of this better, richer, stronger in the things that really matter. Thanks and bye for now.